Hey, everybody. How's it going out there in podcast land? It's Friday night. You know what time it is. It is time for the Fortress of Rock. We're heading into the holiday season. Hope all of you next week get a nice, long, extended 4-day weekend, if not longer. One final little bit of work to get through. Most of us have to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But then after that, we kind of get a break. If you're a student, you get a big break coming up in December into January, a festive time of the year. But of course, every Friday night here on the Fortress of Rock is festive because we talk about the music that you and I know and love, classic rock, new rock, anything involving rock and roll. I'm the Maestro Kevin Crane. It is episode 118 of The Fortress, taping here on November the 17th of 2023. So let us get into it with, of course, news of the world. Segment one, as always, our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and his band Queen. Lots to talk about this week here in news of the world. Let's start off with the basics. The good, the bad, the ugly. Let's start off with the ugly. In my opinion, the ugly. And I'm not just saying this because the man is ugly, but you guys know how I feel about Jann Wenner. And of course, the despicable, deplorable comments he made about his new book and why he excluded women and people of color from being considered for his book about music icons. We're not going to rehash it. If you want to go back, if you don't know about this, you can go back and look. But just suffice it to say, terrible, terrible, awful stuff. Just reinforcing how I've always felt about the guy. He is like the boss at work who doesn't know anything. You know more than the boss does, yet the boss makes more money, the boss gets more prestige, and somehow the boss snows his superiors into thinking he's a genius, or she. Don't want to be sexist. That's how I feel about Jann Wenner. I think he snowed everybody into thinking he's some kind of ridiculous guru of rock and roll when he's not. But now he's got Bob Dylan on his side at a recent New York City concert. Jann Wenner happened to be in attendance. Bob Dylan, who does not talk a lot by all accounts, I wouldn't know. I don't go to see Bob Dylan. Couldn't care less. But supposedly Bob Dylan, between songs, had to stop and comment about Jann Wenner being in the audience and has to discuss how Wenner was unceremoniously booted from the board of directors of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And of course, Dylan says, "Oh, how unfair is that? Let's get him back in." It's unbelievable how out of touch these people can be. Yeah, let's put a misogynistic, racist, faux expert on rock and roll back onto the board of directors for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That sounds like a brilliant idea. But again, I would expect nothing less because I don't like Bob Dylan either. I think he's an overrated hack. His songs are always better performed by somebody else. Most recent example, by the way, I did not mention this when I reviewed the song, and we're going to review the full album here in a little bit. But when I talked about Mozambique, the final song on Jimmy Buffett's Equal Strain on All Parts, I did not mention that's actually a Bob Dylan song. And once again, somebody else, you can call all along the Watchtower up for this one. Plenty of examples of Bob Dylan songs performed much, much better by somebody else. Anyway, so Bob Dylan supporting Jann Wenner, two overrated, I won't say hacks. Bob Dylan's not a hack. Just two vastly overrated, egos overbloated rock and roll quote unquote icons. Now, I foreshadowed this last week. I still haven't got 100% confirmation yet. But as we go into the 2024 concert season, I have multiple reliable sources. Let's put it that way. I'll act like a journalist. I have multiple reliable sources that are telling me that any Live Nation venue you may want to go to for a concert in 2024, be prepared for this. Now, I'm not saying 100% it's going to happen, but in this day and age, the way things are going, I'm not shocked that people are telling me it could happen. Very, very good chance it could happen. Those of us who actually want to see a lot of shows but can't afford to see them up close and personal, I've talked about it last summer, got the lawn pass at my favorite Live Nation venue outside of Indianapolis. It was a little bit hit and miss. And of course, some shows they banned chairs altogether. Some shows they already had pre-sold all the rentals for the lawn chairs that they had at the venue. So I bought a chair, went to a couple shows, just made it so much better. Such a much more enjoyable experience. Of course, you're still dealing with people. So, of course, people make things suck a lot of the time as well. But there are also great people, great and awesome people that hang out at the lawn on a lot of these shows, at a lot of these venues. So if you are going to ban, which is the rumor, you are going to ban outside lawn chairs at all shows in 2024. This is the little bombshell I was alluding to last week. Live Nation is mulling over the idea of banning all outside lawn chairs for all of its events, all of its concerts, at all of its venues in 2024. So I'm not getting a lawn pass again this year, kids. I won't do it. But the thing is, I would have liked the option to maybe get one or two shows. We talked last week about Hootie and the Blowfish and those overblown, no pun intended, prices for that show. But lawn wasn't too terrible. But until I know what the policy is going to be next year, I am not standing for 5 hours again. I had to do it last year for a show. I'm not doing it again. It's painful. It's uncomfortable. It's awful. And now if they're going to ban lawn chairs from the outside, oh, people are sneaking in alcohol. People are sneaking in things they shouldn't. They'll find another way. Banning outside lawn chairs is not the solution. It looks like another money grab by Ticketmaster and Live Nation. And if you haven't been shopping for concert tickets yet for 2024 yet, because a lot of shows have been announced, we'll get to those in a few minutes. But you look at some of the prices, you want to talk about inflation. Of course, Live Nation and Ticketmaster take inflation and multiply it by 10. It's not just the rate of inflation for a carton of eggs or a gallon of milk. It's times 10 because they're greedy. Nobody can compete with them. It's a monopoly. It's still a monopoly. And it's disgusting. On the movie front, of course, we have had the massive hit movie, the Eras Tour with Taylor Swift. Beyonce has a movie coming out about her concert, Renaissance, I believe it's called. But we don't care about that stuff. That's not rock and roll. Billy Idol, State Line, concert film. His band and him, Steve Stevens, of course, playing at the foot of Hoover Dam. Limited, very, very, very limited run here in the U.S. In fact, as we're taping here on November the 17th, the first night has already come and gone. November the 15th was the premiere night here in the U.S. The only other night this concert, this movie will show on screens in theaters in the U.S. is this Sunday, November the 19th. So hopefully you're hearing this Friday or Saturday. So you've got time to go out on Sunday and see Billy Idol's State Line live show recorded at the Hoover Dam. Now, you know I'm always up for some archival material. I whine almost every week about Van Halen not putting out undiscovered lost tracks, early tracks. Well, Def Leppard might have discovered some lost songs from their debut album, On Through the Night, and this comes from their drummer, Rick Allen. So maybe here at some point we're going to see some new/old music from Def Leppard. I would really love to hear these songs. I would really love to because, of course, Def Leppard's sound has changed over the years. And early on, I would like to hear the much more rough, much less polished Def Leppard that we got through On Through the Night and then into High and Dry before Mutt Lange took over, shot him to superstardom with Pyromania. We got the polished sound, we got the distinctive harmony, vocals. So I would really love to hear this early stuff from On Through the Night. And then, of course, because I'm a Van Halen fanatic, just to let you guys know, an excellent article on Ultimate Classic Rock. Their 25 favorite Eddie Van Halen stories, they just updated and reposted on November the 12th. So as one of our primary sources, and of course me as a Van Halen fanatic, if you get some time, downtime at work, downtime at home, check out 25 favorite Eddie Van Halen stories on ultimateclassicrock.com. Now, we did have, unfortunately, a couple people pass away this past week from the world of rock and music. First up, John Morris, who was the basic organizer. He was the man who put Woodstock together. John Morris has left us, and also drummer for Kool and the Gang, George Brown, passed away here actually within the last couple days. So, of course, thoughts and prayers go out to the family and friends of both John Morris and George Brown. Now, we mentioned at the top of the show, it's the holiday season kicking in. disgustingly, one of my local radio stations where I live started playing Christmas music today, and they will not stop until Christmas. Psychotic? Yes. But just to get ahead, get you guys into a little bit of the rock and roll holiday season spirit. We'll try to do this throughout the next 5 or 6 weeks. We'll suggest some gifts for that rock and roll fan in your life, because everybody needs help shopping for gifts for the people they care about, the people they love. Believe me, I know. Year after year after year, with your great friends, your family members, your children, your spouses, the well's going to run dry at some point, and you're going to go, oh my God, what am I going to get so-and-so this year? And you don't want to make it feel like an obligation. You don't want to make it feel false, fake. You don't want to get a gift card. That's a last resort. So what I will try to do as a public service to everybody out there is, over the next month and a half, I will give you gift suggestions for your family and friends. So we've got a couple for you this week. Now, these would be pre-orders, so you wouldn't be able to actually get the product until 2024. But you know how that works. That sometimes it happens. Sometimes people buy concert tickets for their loved ones. Sometimes they buy airline tickets, cruise tickets. The event's not going to happen until the next year, so you can get away with this. Alice Cooper has got a ridiculously elaborate coffee table book called Starring Alice Cooper, coming out in May of 2024. That's a projected shipping date. Now, the cool thing about Starring Alice Cooper, again, it's a massive book, hundreds and hundreds of pages of photos, memorabilia, shots, essays written by some of Alice Cooper's biggest fans in rock and roll media. Every book is signed and numbered, so keep that in mind as well. Now, it's a little pricey. We're talking $300, $400, $500, depending on what version you get. There are 2 different versions, so it's up to you how much you love the person you're going to buy this for or pre-order it for. You would have to go to the website for Rufus Publications, RUFUS, Rufus Publications, to pre-order Starring Alice Cooper. Now, the cover looks awesome. And again, the description, if you are an Alice Cooper fan or you know an Alice Cooper fan, this could be a fantastic Christmas gift. Again, signed and numbered. Now, this one might be a little bit trickier to get. If you're overseas in the UK, I think you've got a better shot. I think that's where the initial shipments, the initial pre-orders will be filled. Otherwise, you're waiting till 2024 here in the US. But Skid Row. What rock band now doesn't have their own line of something? Booze, clothing. I mean, it's just merchandising, marketing, promoting your brand. Skid Row Spirits, of course, the band Skid Row. 2, initially, at least 2 different types of alcohol. Midnight vodka, And of course, Midnight, a great, great classic deep track off of the debut album. And everybody knows 18 in Life. 18 in Life Premium Rum. Again, might be a little bit harder, a little bit trickier to get this one here in the US pre-ordered before December the 25th. UK, I think, again, you might have a better shot at it. But just something to think about. Maybe for next Christmas, maybe for a birthday. But Skid Row Spirits, their vodka and their rum, coming soon. All right, so now we move on to the meat and potatoes. Seems like every week here on News of the World, the main focus is touring news, and it should be. We've got breaking tour news almost each and every week. Bands, performers setting up new jaunts across the U.S. or abroad, North America, South America, Europe, Asia. Of course, we focus on the good old US of A, but on occasion, we will mention some shows overseas. But a lot of news to break this week. This was the week. You can expect it around this time, mid-November, every year. This is when the bands and the performers set up their 2024 tour schedules, for the most part. We'll still see some stragglers when we get into early 2024, January, February. There'll be some bands who decide, let's get out on the road, or a reunion of some sort. We've already talked about Creed. Leonard Skinner and ZZ Top are going to do the Sharp Dressed Simple Man tour again. But let us discuss what we're going to be talking about and reviewing in 2024. Yes, we've already got a couple shows set up for the Fortress of Rock for 2024. How could you expect anything less from the Maestro? So, first up, you knew this was coming. Both of these you pretty much could have predicted, but let's start off first with the 2024 Invincible Shield Tour from Judas Priest. Initially, the tour will take place in April and May. 20 dates with Sabaton as the opening act. I've seen them before. I can't say I'm a huge fan, but at least, I mean, how can you not respect a heavy metal band that has a tank as a drum kit? Look it up online. I'm sure you'll find images, pictures, videos to see what I'm talking about. But the first time I saw the Priest, unfortunately, way too late. Would have loved to have seen them in their heyday in the 80s, but the first time I saw the Priest, Sabaton was the opening act, and that drum kit shaped like a tank just blew me away. No pun intended. So Sabaton is back with Judas Priest as they support the brand new album Invincible Shield. Again, April and May, 20 dates. I will be seeing them, and I will give you a review of the show. I will be seeing them May the 4th, Wings Stadium in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Same place I saw them the last time I saw them. Opening act that time was Queensryche, though. The other major tour news, and again, this will be a review, late summer 2024, Sammy Hagar with Loverboy the interesting things about this Sammy Hagar tour announcement. Number one, Joe Satriani is going to be with the band. So basically, we're looking at three-fourths of Chickenfoot, with Jason Bonham replacing Chad Smith on drums. But it's not Chickenfoot. We don't care about Chickenfoot at this point. I mean, I love Chickenfoot. Don't get me wrong. 2 great albums. 2 unbelievable albums. And Joe Satriani back in the fold. That was enough. But there's more. And again, Sammy Hagar, I love him, but he talks out of both sides of his mouth. Recently said, there's no Van Halen tribute coming. There's no tour. There's no one-off show. I can't get anything together, and it's not my responsibility to do so. And then just a few weeks later, what do we get? We get the announcement of the Best of All Worlds tour. Again, Joe Satriani coming in. Again, initially 28 dates, July and August of 2024. We're talking about a 75% set list with Van Halen. So Sammy, again, he says, I'm not responsible for this. I can't put this together. I can't do a tribute tour and bring in Alex and bring in David Lee Roth, who, by the way, he kind of in a backhanded, not an insult, but kind of a slap to the face of the two, kind of like an old school duel challenge. Take the glove off, the gauntlet, slap him in the face and say, let's do this. He basically challenges Alex Van Halen and David Lee Roth, say, come out on tour. Come out on tour with us. Got Michael Anthony, of course, on bass. I've got Joe Satriani, the next best thing I can get you when it comes to guitarists who can play Eddie Van Halen. And of course, Joe Satriani, so great, so humble, learning all of these riffs, learning all of these songs from Van Halen so he can do justice to the memory of Eddie Van Halen. The Best of All Worlds tour. Again, mostly Van Halen. We'll get a little bit of solo Sammy, I'm sure. But this is going to be heavy on Van Halen. How could I not buy tickets for this? So, you will have my review of the Sammy Hagar Best of All Worlds tour in early September of 2024. How about that for looking way, way, way ahead? But you kids know how the concert thing works. You got to buy the tickets 7, 8, 9 months ahead of time. And it's all right. Sometimes it's all right. Now, earlier this year, we saw Extreme in Living Color, gave you my review of that. Phenomenal show. Once we get here to the end of the year and we start doing our wrap up of the best of 2023, wouldn't shock me if Extreme and Living Color is in the top 3 of all the concerts we've talked about here in the past year. If you have a chance, you haven't seen this show yet, go out and see the Thicker Than Blood tour with Extreme and Living Color. They have added 7 more shows, predominantly down south. So if you're in Florida, a lot of these shows are in Florida. They cover most of March of 2024. Get out there and see Extreme with Living Color. Great, great, phenomenal double bill. Then finally, I have mixed feelings about this because he put out one of the worst songs of all time. And that's something I can never get over. I can never get over it. I have a certain list. I have a specific list of about 7 or 8 songs that have downgraded artists that I would otherwise love, admire. Journey, REO Speedwagon come to mind. Bryan Adams. Bryan Adams put out that god-awful song from the Robin Hood movie with Kevin Costner. Everything I do for you. And just saying that title, I threw up in my mouth a little bit. A god-awful, abysmal, terrible song. And we're talking about a guy who put together some of my favorite albums from the early 80s. Reckless, oh my God, Reckless. Such a phenomenal album. Cuts Like a Knife. Into the Fire. Bryan Adams had such an incredible run when I was growing up, going through high school and early college years. And I'm happy. I am unbelievably happy that he is now back, popular enough to be touring pretty good size arenas here. You know, we're talking about solid basketball arena size venues. So that's encouraging to me. So I don't want to rip on Bryan Adams just because of one terrible song. He did have a bunch of other terrible songs later on, though, because he thought, well, I did it once, maybe I should do more like this. And then, of course, lost most of his rock and roll credibility in the radio overplays Summer of '69 and blah, 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 blah. You get where I'm going here. Just revisit Cuts Like a Knife at your leisure. Listen to Reckless again. Remember that despite the fact he has so many terrible, awful ballads, to his credit, he also has a lot of phenomenal rocking songs. One of the best songs I ever saw in concert was Take Me Back when he was opening for Journey. I believe I saw that show when I was 17 or 18 years old. And number one, I thought that he was better than Journey. So kudos to him for that. And he always puts on a really good show. I've seen him open for Journey, seen him open for Def Leppard. Again, the ballads are just awful, though. But I would recommend, if you've never seen Bryan Adams, get out there, check him out on this tour. January through March, 29 dates, couple in Mexico. Bryan Adams is definitely worth seeing if you've never checked him out before. So, all right, kids, that's going to do it. Segment 1, the news of the world, is over here on the Fortress of Rock, but new music coming up next. The brand new, unfortunately, probably last album from Jimmy Buffett, Equal Strain on All Parts. And one new song for you, formerly of Motley Crue, Mick Mars, Loyal to the Lie. Breakdown is coming up next after a quick promo break. I will be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, the news of the world. our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, Breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock, episode 118 here on November the 17th, 2023. It is time for Breakdown, and we have talked about over the last few weeks how there is actually, unusually, for this time of year, a lot of new music to review. So again, lucky that we'll have new albums to review all through the rest of 2023 and probably into 2024. Jimmy Buffett's final album. I'm assuming it's his final album here on Breakdown. Of course, Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, the late, great Tom Petty. Equal strain on all parts. Again, I hope this is the final album. I really, again, going back to segment one, I love the archival material, but it's really difficult to put together a full album of really good original material that somebody left behind. That it just doesn't work that way. If it was good enough to be released or put on an album, in most cases it would have been. We remember releases like Led Zeppelin's Coda. We just reviewed the Beatles' Now and Then last week, which had to be pieced together through old audio tapes, and it's, you just hope that this is it. This is Jimmy Buffett's swan song. He had this pretty much finished, done, before he unfortunately passed away, and we lost him. Now, I do not claim to be a parrot head. I've seen Jimmy Buffett in concert a couple times. I enjoy the experience, but I don't get into it as much as everybody else, the parrot heads, do. All the other Jimmy Buffett fanatics. And again, I mentioned last segment there was a great story on Ultimate Classic Rock about Eddie Van Halen tales. Well, there's also one they posted within the last 2 to 3 weeks about the most diehard, dedicated fan bases in rock. So that's another one you should check out. And of course, the parrot heads are in there. I will address here as we go through the review of Equal Strain on All Parts what I think are the strengths of Jimmy Buffett that don't get enough recognition, and the weaknesses that I think people overlook when it comes to Jimmy Buffett. So as always, here on the Fortress of Rock, what do we do when we review an album? We go track by track. 14 songs. Let's get it going. So now a lot of these songs, we've reviewed already. So those I might skip over a little bit quicker than I normally would. Starting off with the leadoff track, University of Bourbon Street. Now, I like it. I think it's typical Jimmy Buffett with the party vibe, he's very, very good. Here's where we talk about the strengths, the overlooked strengths of Jimmy Buffett. Jimmy Buffett never gets enough credit for being a phenomenal, great, creative songwriter, especially his lyrics. Now, we know he wrote Southern Cross, which ended up being a big hit for Crosby, Stills, and Nash. You can look it up and see all the other songs he's written, some for other people that became big hits. But University of Bourbon Street exemplifies what people, I think, what people love about Jimmy Buffett. The party atmosphere, the lightheartedness, getting his education in New Orleans, and all the references. He drops a lot of references throughout his songs, especially on this album, that most people wouldn't quite get. Like talking about a muffaletta. If you've never been to New Orleans, you might not know what a muffaletta is. I luckily have been there a couple times. I love the city. So sometimes his cultural references will fly over your head. And there are some here on this album that I don't get, that parrot heads would probably scorn and shame me for. But University of Bourbon Street, great, fun song to lead off, equal strain on all parts. And then we move on to Bubbles Up, another song we've already reviewed. More mellow, but again, it fits into the Jimmy Buffett vibe, his positivity, and in a lot of his songs, he's trying to be inspirational in a roundabout way. He might be talking about having a good time and partying it up, but in many ways, he's talking about living life to the fullest. And that's what you kind of get from Bubbles Up, another really good song. And then we get An Audience of One. And again, it's just fun. It's fun, fun, fun. You can kind of take this song as an early stage look at an up and coming performer, as basically this character, I'll say this character is playing for an audience of one, which is his dog, but still maintains some level of positivity. Playing for an audience of one, much better than playing for an audience of none. Again, Jimmy Buffett is very, very good at giving you sound life advice in his lyrics. And again, we all know there's bad things that happen, awful, terrible things that happen in life. But that's why Jimmy Buffett is so popular, I think, is that he is the ultimate escapism artist. You go listen to Jimmy Buffett, you go see him live, you are definitely leaving all your troubles behind. So I really liked An Audience of One, and I also, of course, previously reviewed like My Gummy Just Kicked In, track 4. In this day and age, a little bit more modern partying for Jimmy Buffett, as he's describing a female partygoer basically letting loose, and you can tell by the title how she is letting loose. But again, a really fun song. Then track 5, maybe the first song where I didn't really get it. Although, again, the lyrics are so creative. And maybe this is where I bring up the negative. I brought up the positive with Jimmy Buffett, where he is such a great, detailed songwriter that in track 5, Close Calls, he's bringing up fighting with Buford Pusser. And again, if you don't know who Buford Pusser is, you got to look it up. It's a reference. Yes, older people know who I'm talking about. The younger generation will not. But just to have that kind of reference in a song, a deep reference like that, is very creative and very fun. But here's the negative. This is the kind of song that shows me the limitations of Jimmy Buffett and why he never ascended to the heights that other artists, bands have. And again, not criticizing him. So parrot heads, do not get mad at me. But number one, Jimmy Buffett is very limited vocally. You cannot say Jimmy Buffett is a great singer. You can't. You just can't. He's capable. He's solid. But the songs are limited by his vocal range and the musical range of his band, because they never, and I'm not saying they have to be showy. I'm not saying you have to have flashy guitar solos, but it's the basic, okay, here's the kettle drums in half the album, with the Caribbean vibe, and it's just, those are massive limitations that I think have always kept Jimmy Buffett in his little niche where he's made tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. And good for him and good for his brand. The Margaritaville brand is just rock solid. And nobody's taking that away from him. Nobody would ever take that away from him. Envious, jealous beyond belief. But I think it's bigger than the music. I think the music is limited in a certain scope and a certain way, a lot of it because of his vocal limitations and his musical limitations. That's the part I was talking about where maybe he gets more credit than he deserves. Whereas with the songwriting, I think he deserves more credit. Feel free to comment. And I know the parrot heads are probably mad. That's fine. The one thing you're going to get on the Fortress of Rock from me is brutal honesty. Then you get the nice track 6, sweet, meditative, equal strain on all parts, the title track. And by the way, that is a fantastic title for a song and an album. That's got to be one of my favorites of all time. Equal strain on all parts. Just a great, great title. But equal strain on all parts is one of those, you're getting older, you got to deal with aging. How do you deal with it? Let me take some advice from an older generation. Just a really nice, great song. Then we've talked about track 7 before, Like My Dog. And keep in mind, not all of these songs are Jimmy Buffett's songs. He didn't write all of these. Like My Dog is not one of his. But he makes it his own. He makes it funny. He makes it very, very sly, witty, a little dirty. So the first half of the album, we're at the halfway point in the album, and it's going great. It is going great. Easily, to me at least, one of Jimmy Buffett's best albums that I've listened to. Unfortunately, the second half, as we've talked about with a lot of albums, loses steam. Now, again, people will argue with me about the second half of this album, and that's fine. Track 8 really, really hurt because it was my least favorite song by far on this album. And a lot of people will say, oh, it's just a fun party song. It's irritating and it's dull and it's repetitive. T-Punch Cafe with its irritating chorus of ooh la, oolay, ooh la, oolay. Ooh. I got over it after the first time, but it keeps going on and on and on, and it's it sounds like something that a generic band would play when you got off the boat in an island resort to say, hey, Mon, here you are in paradise. Let's play a generic party song for you. Sorry, but that's how it feels. And then track 9, a little better, but still, I don't know what this song was meant to be, Portugal or PEI. I did like the self-referential lyrics where Jimmy Buffett saying, everybody's asking me where I'm going to go when the volcanoes blow. Of course, referring to one of his most famous songs of all time, Volcano. But it just didn't grab me. It didn't do much for me otherwise. Again, I kind of like the self-referential twist, but the song overall needs to be better to really make it work, bring it home for me. Then we get the best of Jimmy Buffett. We're going back to the light, fluffy, fun Jimmy Buffett vibe with track 10, Nobody Works on Friday. Thursday coming in hot. It's just a great, catchy song. And the way things are going, we're getting to a point where nobody is going to work on Friday. But this is the standard workplace vibe that everybody knows going back decades and decades. When you're in that last day of the work week before you hit the weekend, and I'm talking about the 9 to 5, 40 hours a week people. I know I'm not trying to diss or exclude the hardworking people who are on overnight shifts on the weekends, people who work fast food or retail. God love you. I've done both fast food and retail, so I know what it's like. Been there, done that. But Nobody Works on Friday is just great. Just exactly what you would expect from Jimmy Buffett. Now, track 11 is Fish Porn. I'm not a fisherman, so maybe that's why this song doesn't hit for me. But a song about somebody obsessed with fishing day after day after day doesn't do much for me. Maybe if the song itself was a little better, it's just kind of middle of the road, mediocre Jimmy Buffett. Now you get to track 12, which is interesting, but again, I don't think it's a great song, is Johnny's Room, RHUM. A song about the French Elvis Presley, Johnny Holiday. A lot of references to classic rock and roll artists, Elvis, Carl Perkins, but the song itself didn't do much for me. Luckily, though, the final two songs bring things back a little bit and really close out the album very well. Now, track 13, Columbus, I will admit initially I was not a big fan of. It grew on me. Basically, a nice little dreamscape song about traveling, dreaming of Columbus, of course, the explorer. And then, of course, we've talked about track 14, which could end up being the final recorded song in terms of sequence on an album from Jimmy Buffett, the Bob Dylan song Mozambique. And again, we talked about this earlier. Jimmy Buffett knocks it out of the park. Another Bob Dylan song that somebody else performs and turns into a classic. All right, so there you go. There is my review of Equal Strain on All Parts. As you could tell, I was pretty enthusiastic. I like the album a lot. It's probably not going to be in the running for one of my favorite albums of the year. Again, foreshadowing, looking forward to a month from now when we start running down the best of 2023 when it comes to songs, albums, concerts. But even though it might not really make the cut for the best albums of the year, or I don't know, I don't think any of the songs will probably be listed among the best of 2023 for me either. This is a good, solid album that I will listen to again. Maybe, I don't mean this as an insult, maybe a background album, especially next summer. Especially next summer. A friend of mine said this would be good porch music. And I agree completely. You put it on when you're out on the back porch, grilling, having a few adult beverages. That's the kind of album it is. And there is nothing wrong with that. God bless Jimmy Buffett. We miss Jimmy Buffett. We needed more people like him in this world. One song review this week. Mick Mars, former guitarist for Motley Crue. And of course, it's still difficult for me to refer to him like that because Mick Mars was with Motley Crue from the beginning to, well, at least here recently, not the end yet. Of course, John 5 has taken over as the lead guitarist for Motley Crue. Now, I will say this, and it will sound cruel and it will sound mean, but for Motley Crue to move on, for them to thrive and maybe put out new music, now, Vince Neil needs to go as well, but I think bringing in a better guitarist, and I'm sorry, John 5 is a much better guitarist than Mick Mars. And I'm not just saying that because Mick Mars is older and, of course, has health issues that impact his performing. I think John 5 now is even better than Mick Mars was in his heyday back in the 80s. I'm sorry, I do. So Motley Crue is fine going forward. Again, I have my doubts about Vince Neil, but Mick Mars goes the solo route. And the first song we get off the upcoming solo album, The Other Side of Mars, is Loyal to the Lie. This is a hard song for me to review. I have listened to it multiple times, and I still don't quite know what to make of it. It's got a little bit of an industrial kind of edge to it, a little bit of Nine Inch Nails vibe to it. Now, one of the things in a discussion with a friend of mine who also listened to this, when you look at albums, songs, projects that center around the guitar player more than they do a band or a lead singer, you tread dangerous territory. It can go really, really well, or it can go really, really badly. And when I say that, I'm talking about things, bands, projects like the Lynch Mob, of course, Lynch Mob, George Lynch, bringing in outside vocalists to perform songs for him. But it's him. It's his project, it's his band, and you can tell when he starts ripping into a solo, that song, that album, that band is his. You could say the same thing about Yngwie Malmsteen, Michael Schenker. Even though they're not singing the songs, and a lot of the time, the vocalists they bring in are not good. They're generic, they're bland, they don't rise to the occasion to at least come close to matching the performance of the star virtuoso guitar player who the band is centered around. And unfortunately, again, referring to Mick Mars not being the greatest guitarist in the world, I'm not sure. I think a project like this with Mick Mars as the focal point is going to work all that well. And this seems to fall into the trap of a lot of these projects, albums, bands that I just referenced. Now, with Lynch Mob, we got the great Wicked Sensation. We know we've had great stuff come from Yngwie Malmsteen. We also know that Michael Schenker just put out a terrible album here recently with the Michael Schenker group. It sometimes seems very hard for these guitarists to subjugate themselves and let a really good, young, dynamic lead singer rise up to be an equal. It seems like they almost look at it as a threat. Now, Ted Nugent's another one where Ted Nugent, we know he sings vocals on some of his big hits. Of course, Cat Scratch Fever, first to come to mind. But Stranglehold, he did not sing Stranglehold. It's a very delicate balance. These guitarists, these virtuoso, big name guitarists have to play with, they have to find out where their ego can fit in. Can they keep their ego in check enough to let somebody enhance, accentuate the music? Or are they just going to say, no, I'm the star. We'll just do a generic song for 2 minutes until we get to the guitar solo, and then I'll tear it up, and everybody will love it and know it's me. Now, this all comes back around, of course, to Loyal to the Lie from Mick Mars. And I think the problem here is, while the song isn't terrible, and again, very hard for me to review this, even having listened to it multiple times, is that Mick Mars' guitar work doesn't rise to the point where you can even look at it like a Lynch Mob or something from Yngwie Malmsteen, where you know you're going to get a Molten Lava solo in there where the guitarist is putting their foot down and saying, this is my project, this is my band. And again, sometimes that's great, sometimes not so great. But here, Mick Mars just doesn't have that reputation as a guitar player. I'm sorry, but he doesn't. Even back in the heyday when he played some great riffs on songs like Looks That Kill, he was always considered, I hate to say it, the fourth member of Motley Crue. And how many times, how often can you say that in a band, the guitarist was the least important member of the band? But Motley Crue, I think that was the case. I think you would say Mick Mars was the least important member of that band. And so it shows through here a little bit on Loyal to the Lie. Well, again, the song is interesting and it's not terrible. I think it's a little bit rudderless It doesn't have a direction. So I can't recommend it. And I feel bad for Mick Mars. I kind of understand both sides, where Motley Crue wanted to move on with the better guitar player, and Mick Mars wanted to get away from being the fourth wheel. But again, I don't see how this is going to be beneficial for him down the road, outside of maybe emotionally, mentally, giving him an extra sense of freedom, an extra level of freedom away from Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee and Vince Neil. All right, that's going to do it for Breakdown. Segment 2 is done. Of course, you know we're only halfway home. We've got the rock and roll DeLorean warming up in the garage. Hopefully, Doc Brown is getting it ready to go up to 1.21 gigawatts. And we're going into the rock and roll time stream. Next segment here on the Fortress of Rock is, of course, I Want to Go Back. A quick promo break, and Doc Brown and I will be right back. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock here on November the 17th, 2023. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are. And I am sitting next to Doc Brown in the rock and roll DeLorean. He's getting it ready to get up to 1.21 gigawatts in the rock and roll time stream. But as he does that, this is the point in every episode we have to acknowledge the great organizations, platforms, sources that we use here on the Fortress of Rock. And of course, first and foremost, you know where you found us, but you have options, you have choices. You can always find the Fortress of Rock on these fine platforms: Spotify, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Amazon Music, Audible, and iHeartRadio. Now, of course, we always talk about the Facebook page. Always a lot of things going on the weekend. It's rock and roll. That's when all the good stuff happens, is on the weekends. As this episode of the Fortress of Rock drops, the Weekend Rock Project has just dropped as well. Of course, the Weekend Rock Project, a little bit of a fun game we play with all of our followers, our listeners, our friends on Facebook. We give you a word, a phrase, an idea, a concept, a theme. You pick your favorite rock songs that fit. Post them along with everybody else. Get some discussion going. Get some debate going. Some back and forth. It's all in good fun. We don't want trolls. We don't want nasty, mean people. So if you're going to do that kind of stuff, just don't even bother. It's for fun. We want to have fun. We need some positivity in this day and age of absolute negative vibes, attitudes. We don't want you on our Facebook page. We only want people who are going to add to the discussion in a positive way. Sorry. I'm usually not a big positivity, hippy-dippy type person, but right now we need all the good vibrations we can get. Great song by the Beach Boys, by the way. One of my favorites. And of course, that was what I picked for my favorite song last week, because this is part 2 of a 2-part Weekend Rock project on the Fortress of Rock Facebook page. Last week, your favorite rock songs with good in the title, hence Good Vibrations. This week, bad. I, of course, real quick, just didn't want to, I needed to get down here, start recording in the studio for the podcast. So I picked the easiest ones that came to mind. I picked George Thorogood's Bad to the Bone, and I picked Nickelback's Too Bad. So now it's your turn. Get out there and participate. And again, sorry, I don't want trolls. Healthy debate, good. Mindless insults, bad. Now, of course, a lot of the stories that I bring up, especially in segment 1, News of the World, and here in segment 3, I want to go back. I know about some of them just from casual glancing at websites every day, news, pop culture, trivia, whatever you want to say. This is where I find the ideas for the stories that I talk about each and every week on this podcast. So my sources deserve credit. Now, again, keep in mind the nuggets, the kernels, the basic ideas of these stories come from these websites, but the opinions, the ranting, the ravings, the anger, the jubilation, the emotions, that's all me, mine and mine alone. And of course, you guys know by now, the 3 main sources for a lot of my stories are ultimateclassicrock.com. We've mentioned them already a couple times tonight. thisdayinmusic.com and the mighty Van Halen news desk. Because when you're a Van Halen fanatic like me, you're going to have the #1 Van Halen fan website locked down, bookmarked, checking it daily to see if we ever get the vault opened. But I digress. All right, Doc Brown says we are up to speed, so I am safe to begin. Anniversaries here on November the 17th. Let's go back to 2007. Seems like we've been talking a lot about the Eagles here over the last few months. November the 17th, 2007. Long Road Out of Eden by the Eagles. Their first studio album since the long run was the #1 album in the U.S. on this day in 2007. Going back to November the 17th of 1984. I've admitted this band is a guilty pleasure. I've told you guys the stories about how there were certain bands back in the 80s the guys did not feel comfortable admitting that they liked. Duran Duran was one of them. And of course, Wham. I remember I bought a copy of the album, Wham's album, with their debut with all their big hits. And George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley were on the cover. It was almost as embarrassing as buying Poison's Look What the Cat Dragged In. Now, musically, no. Musically, I was not embarrassed buying Poison, but you guys know what that album cover looked like. But I basically had to do the equivalent of walking in to the record store, my local record store, back in 1984. I think the album was Make It Big. I think that was the album. And basically had to go in sunglasses and a hat because I didn't want to ruin my rock cred back at that early age. So I buy a copy of Make It Big by Wham, which featured, of course, the number one U.S. single on this day in 1984, Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. So I buy the album, I take it home, and it skips. True story. The album skips. I was no way in hell. No way am I taking this album back. I am not going to go back into the record store and try to exchange Wham. I already barely got out alive buying it in the first place. And now I have to go back and tell them it skips, give me another copy of Wham. Look at the social injustice I could have put myself through if I had to show up for a second time at the record store in a transaction involving Wham. Nope, I kept the album that skipped. I suffered through it. There was no way I was going to go back. Now, if it'd been Judas Priest, Van Halen, of course, taking it right back in, being indignant, saying, oh, I want my money back. I want a new copy of this album. It skips. How dare you sell me a defective copy of Screaming for Vengeance or Fair Warning? How dare you? With Wham, you kind of like go, thank you very much. Let me get out of the store right now. You can keep the change. Keep the change. I don't want the change. Just let me get out of the store. I've got the album. Nobody can see it in a dark plastic bag. Just let me get out of here. Thank you. Goodbye. 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 And it skipped. So anyway, Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. Number one on this day in the U.S. in 1984. Then finally going all the way back to 1962, November the 17th. Not my cup of tea. I do like some old school, late 50s, early 60s rock, but the over the top falsetto of Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons wasn't something I really liked and still don't like to this day. But again, we acknowledge the greats here on the Fortress of Rock. On this day in 1962, Big Girls Don't Cry by the Four Seasons was the number one single in the U.S. All right, let's move on to birthdays. November the 17th, 1966, Richard Fortus. You go, who is Richard Fortus? Well, believe it or not, a lot of you might not know this. This could be a trivia question to stump your friends and family with over the Thanksgiving holiday. When you get together and you start bickering about anything and everything over turkey, diffuse a situation and ask, who is the guitar player who has been and is currently in Guns N' Roses for over 20 years? See if anybody can answer that one. No, it's not Slash. Obviously, it's not Izzy Stradlin. Richard Fortus has been with Guns N' Roses now since 2002. On the same day, November the 17th, 1966, Jeff Buckley was born. Unfortunately, the tragic story behind Jeff Buckley, drowned at the age of 30. His father was a very important musician, succumbed to drug addiction, died, I believe, of a heroin overdose. And Jeff Buckley was only known, but well known, for one album and one album only. That would be Grace. One of those bands that I find much, much better than they get credit for. They had their fair share of hits. They sold a decent amount of albums, but I think they deserved much better. A much better fate was the Smithereens. Of course, they wore their love for the Beatles on their sleeves. Very, very heavily influenced by that 60s sound, but still had a nice hard edge to them at times. Listen to the songs like Behind the Wall of Sleep, Blood and Roses. They were able to take their 60s, heavy 60s influence, give it a more modern, harder edge, still keeping somewhat of their pop sensibilities. Of course, their lead singer, Pat Denizio, has died, been gone for quite a while now, but the Smithereens are still trying to carry on. Recently, they were out on tour with Marshall Crenshaw. Their guitarist, Jim Babjack, born on this day in 1957. Born on November the 17th of 1946, Martin Barre, guitarist for Jethro Tull. And very significant in that most of the time you think about the fact that it's Ian Anderson and a bunch of other guys. That's what you think of when you think of Jethro Tull. Ian Anderson is Jethro Tull. But you don't want to insult, you don't want to dismiss all the other players, all the other musicians who contributed. And Martin Barre, next to Ian Anderson, second longest tenured member of Jethro Tull. He was in it through all the classic stuff for the most part. So, the Aqualung era, Thick as a Brick, all that. And then finally, and probably most significantly here in our birthday segment, and I want to go back, November the 17th, 1938 was the birthday for Gordon Lightfoot. And of course, I will admit I'm guilty of this. I kind of dismiss Gordon Lightfoot. I sit there, I go, yeah, I know he had some decent sized, significant songs. The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, Sundown, If You Could Read My Mind, and then you start going, wait a minute, I keep rattling off all these big hit songs. Maybe this guy deserves a little bit more credit than we give him. So do not dismiss Gordon Lightfoot, born on this day in 1938. And that's going to do it for segment 3 here, November the 17th, 2023. I, of course, am the Maestro Kevin Crane, Doc Brown, bringing the rock and roll DeLorean back into the Fortress garage, shutting the garage door, pulling up the drawbridge over the moat. But you guys know we are not done yet. One final segment left after a quick final promo break. Time to discuss what we're going to be reviewing and break down the new music throughout the rest of November and throughout December into the cold winter months. Wrap It Up is up next. Hang out for just a few more minutes with me. I'll be right back. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, kids. The next time I talk to you, we will be fully into the holiday season on the Fortress of Rock. Next episode will be November the 24th, so Thanksgiving will be done. Black Friday will be upon us. Shopping, online, in person, buying all those gifts for your loved ones, your friends, your family. We tried to help you out a little bit in segment 1. We'll try to do a little bit more for you over the next few weeks. Suggestions for gifts for the rock and roll fan in your life. But keep treating yourself to this podcast, The Fortress of Rock, each and every Friday night. Next week, as we get into Wrap It Up, our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. I'm shifting the schedule a little bit from what I originally thought I was going to do last week. For next week's Black Friday episode, another great gift idea, by the way. CD, DVD combo. We're going to be reviewing Night Ranger, 40 Years and a Night. Their recently released combo pack, as I mentioned, CD and DVD. Their concert with the Contemporary Youth Orchestra. All the great hits from Night Ranger with an orchestra backing them up. So, of course, we know Kiss has done this, Metallica, most recently Def Leppard. Def Leppard's was awful. Drastic Symphonies was terrible. I can tell you this. I've already listened to 40 Years and a Night, Night Ranger with the Contemporary Youth Orchestra. Much, much better. The orchestra does not overwhelm. They don't change the songs to fit the orchestra. The orchestra is there only to accentuate some of the parts of the classic Night Ranger songs that we know and love and make them better. Basically, the keyboard parts, you know how this works. Keyboard parts, the orchestra fits in naturally to bring those parts to the forefront, to give them a little more power, a little more significance in the overall mix. So, next Friday night, I will have my review of Night Rangers 40 Years and a Night. We've bumped Jesse James Dupree back another week. Episode 120 on December the 1st. Jackal's lead singer, their front man, his latest solo album, Breathing Fire, Jesse James Dupree. In 2 weeks, he will be the featured album review here on the Fortress of Rock. In 3 weeks, we've talked about this album, the songs on this album, a lot throughout 2023. In the end, you got to say it's creative marketing from Peter Gabriel, releasing a new song every new moon. Finally, I.O. comes out here in a couple weeks. If it does come out as slated, and with Peter Gabriel, I don't know. I'll believe it when I have the CD in my hot little hands. I.O. will be the featured album review in 3 weeks. Episode 121, dropping December the 8th. And of course, we still, to carry us through the rest of 2023 into 2024, have new stuff from Dirty Honey, The Struts, Duran Duran, kind of new, kind of cover songs, that whole Danse Macabre, that dark themed Halloween album they put out. We've still got Mark Tremonti, his Christmas album. Yes, we might do a Christmas episode. I don't know yet. And then, of course, next week's Black Friday episode will also feature our final concert review of the year. Thankfully, as we talked about in segment 1, we've got Sammy, Hagar, and Judas Priest already on the slate for 2024, but the final concert of 2023 for the Fortress of Rock, you'll get that review next Friday, Black Friday. Chris Isaak at the Lerner Theater in Elkhart, Indiana. As far as songs go, the second single from Judas Priest off Invincible Shield is Trial by Fire. We'll have that for you in the next week or two. We've got yet another new song from David Lee Roth. Just put out the full album already that you did with John 5. Just put it out. Jesus, Dave, what are you doing? It works for Peter Gabriel, putting out these songs piecemeal. I don't think it's working for you. Just put out the full album. High Fashion from David Lee Roth, coming up here soon on the Fortress of Rock. And then finally, we talked about Geddy Lee, and of course his autobiography is going to be out here for the holiday season. I am sure that will be a huge hit. I'm not kidding. I think that among rock biographies, autobiographies, that could be a killer in terms of popularity, sales, quality. But Geddy Lee, of course, has started a book tour for his autobiography. And on the first night in New York, he debuted 2 new songs, Gone and I Am You Are. And of course, we also talked recently about the fact that he is not dismissing a reunion with Alec Lifeson and possibly bringing back the Rush name. And of course, speculation has started about who they would bring in on drums. Would they bring in more than just a drummer? Would they make it a quartet instead of a trio? But Geddy Lee has said that at some point these songs will be released for everybody to listen to on streaming services. So, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to listen to and review these two brand new Geddy Lee songs. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Fortress of Rock. It has been a long week. I am tired. I tried to put my best foot forward for you guys this week. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. Had to do a lot of editing, a lot of splicing, a lot of re-recording. But next week will be much better, much less hectic. I know. What about Thanksgiving? What about all the football? What about all... My life seems to be a complete 180. My life is very, very busy at times when everybody else is just living the normal 9 to 5 life. And then holidays is when that time when you guys are all dealing with family and buying gifts and presents and shopping, and that's when I get to relax. So it's upside down, topsy-turvy. So Black Friday, that episode next week should be stellar. I promise you, 99.9% a top level Fortress of Rock episode. But that being said, wrapping this one up, putting a bow on it, yes, holiday reference, very, very early. You know how this all ends. You love the one you're with. I will talk to you in 7 days. Peace out. I'm the Maestro. Good night, kids.